Hi there, welcome to today's How-To with Paul. Today, we're going to show you how to do an oil change on a 2017 Mercedes E300 W213 model. This is a 2.0 liter. I want to talk about some of the easy ways to do things. I've done oil changes for many years. Normally, it's not worth it to do yourself, quite honestly. I would just normally pay to have it done. But of course, being a Mercedes-Benz, everywhere you go, price is double, triple what it would cost you to do yourself. So I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to show you how to do it. First thing I want to do is always, whenever I do an oil change, the first thing I do is I always pull the oil dipstick up so that I know that there's no oil in the car. That gives me an indication that I'm about ready to drain the oil and get things done. I also like to take the oil cap off the car. Also, just as a reminder, you didn't have oil in the car. So on this vehicle, to be able to access anything, first thing you got to do on Mercedes, they have this cover that goes over the engine. It just pops up, work your way around it. It's got clips that hold it down, and they just pull straight up, and that's how it pulls off. Just place that off to the side. Okay. The other thing you will need to do to access the oil filter is that I'm going to move the camera here, get in a little tighter. Okay, I'm going a little tighter, so hopefully, sorry for the shaking. You have this tube here that goes across that runs to your air filter. This needs to be removed to easily access the oil filter. You could do it without, but it just makes sense to pull it off because it's quick and easy to remove. You just got some plastic clips here that hold it in. This whole piece will pop off, okay? Then over here, we have another little push pin that'll pull up, and that just snaps right out of place. And squeeze this, pull that right out of the air filter, and the whole thing just comes off to the side. Now you have good, clean, easy access to the oil filter right here. Okay, so that'll be one of the first things I'm going to go ahead and remove. This is a canister type oil filter, so you use a socket and a ratchet, and you just go ahead and remove that. So using my wrench, I'm going to put that on there, and we're just going to loosen it. And we'll just loosen it up slowly so that the oil has a chance to go back down to the bottom of the engine and hopefully doesn't make a big mess. Okay. Okay, once it's loose, I'm just going to go ahead and let it sit there for a little bit while I drain the oil. That way all the oil runs down out of the filter without making a big mess all over the engine. I also do want to note that in order to drain the oil in this car, you do need to remove the skid plate from underneath the plastic of the car, which I will show you in a separate clip of where all the bolts are. There's a bunch of bolts holding it down. Unfortunately, there's a million bolts that hold it down so you can even access the drain hole. But because it's so hard to get a camera underneath there, I'm going to go ahead and do that separate so I can show you that separately. Okay, so before you can do the oil change on your Mercedes, this is a 2017 E300 Mercedes W213. You will need to remove the skid plate. So I decided to show you what the skid plate looks like taken off, since it's almost impossible to get underneath the car and take a good video of it. So these are all the bolts that you have to remove. You've got one bolt here in the front, another bolt here in the front, another bolt here in the front, and another one there. Those are the first you take off. Then as you go further down the skid plate towards the back of the car, you're going to have another one here, another one here, another one here, another one here. That'll remove this piece. Then you get to this piece here, which is actually where it's covering the oil drain hole, which is right in this general area. Why Mercedes did not leave a hole here so you could just access it, I have no idea, but they must know better than us. So anyway, you have to remove the skid plate. So you continue removing those bolts. You will have one here. You'll have one here. You have one way back here at the very back of the car. Another one at the very back of the car. And then also another one here and another one there. And those are all the bolts that you'll need to remove in order to drain the oil out of your car to do the oil change. Okay, so for our oil change on our Mercedes, we're going to be using Mobil 1 full synthetic European formula. This is a W40. This is what's recommended for this climate. There are other recommendations you can use, but in Southern California, we get pretty warm, and W40 is recommended for pretty much all weather, and that will work best for us. So this car requires 7.4 quarts total. That's with the filter change. Without the filter change, they say it's 6.9. So I have 7 quarts of oil sitting here. I have my new oil filter, my O-rings that go to my oil filter. This will all be needed to do the oil change, as well as I picked up a new air filter because I don't think it's ever been changed on this car, and I already suspect that we'll be needing a new one. So these are the things that you'll need to perform the oil change. Make sure you have your oil in stock. Right now, oil is expensive. I had a hard time finding this. I had to go to 6 different stores just to find enough oil to do the oil on this oil change on this vehicle. Okay, so here we are underneath the Mercedes. Just want to show you where the oil drain plug is. Excuse the shakiness of the hands. It's a little difficult to be underneath here. But as you go past this first cross member, this is where the skid plate would have been mounted all the way across here. It covers pretty much the whole bottom of the car all the way from front to rear. So this is why I couldn't really do this with the camera, couldn't show you. But once you've gotten the skid plate off, this is your drain plug. Okay, this is the engine drain plug. Further back is a transmission drain plug over here. Don't pull that one out by mistake, because this is the oil drain plug. So we'll go ahead and remove that. I'm going to go ahead and use my wrench. I'm going to crack that loose. And always make sure that you have more than one oil catch pan ready, because when you start to get in trouble and you realize that this one's almost full, it always sucks when you have to get up and go running looking for a pan while oil's spilling all over the place. And because this car holds 7 quarts, it will fill this and some of this. So I'm already prepared with both my oil catch pans and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and remove the drain plug. All right, and we're just going to go ahead and let that oil drain. That'll take a moment, but I'm just going to watch this for a little while as it drains. I'm going to keep an eye on the pan, make sure that this doesn't start to get over full. If it does, I'll just quickly slide this one over underneath it, and we'll go ahead and let that finish draining. I don't think you need to watch it drain, but this is the general idea. Okay, so now we have our oil draining. I'm just letting that drain. I'm gonna come back up here and go ahead and replace the rest of this oil filter. So we went ahead, like I said, we left it loose so it would just drain into the engine and drain back down the drain plug in an event of trying to keep the mess to a minimal. But this is your filter. There it is. And basically, you're just gonna pull the filter up. It snaps in kind of tight, so you just pull it up and it just slides right off. And we'll go ahead and dispose of that. Okay, so we've disposed of that, and one thing I want to talk about, and this is something that people don't do, and this is important. You have 3 O-rings. You have an O-ring here, you have an O-ring here, and you have another O-ring here. What you're going to want to do is you're just going to take a screwdriver or some kind of blunt object. You can just pull those off, and those come in your kit with your filter to be replaced. If you don't replace them, you take a chance of it leaking and causing severe engine damage. So we're going to go ahead and replace those. You might need something a little smaller. Okay, we had to go to a little smaller tool here because it's a little bit tight fit. So I use my little pick. I'm just gonna pull that out of there. Okay, that one's off. Go ahead and dispose of that. And we'll dispose of this one as well. Okay, now all 3 have been removed. Suggest that you wipe it off nice and clean. Try to keep it as clean as possible. There is no such thing as a clean oil change. You will get oil on you. You will spill it on you. I don't care who you are. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our O-rings. And we're going to go ahead and put those on. We're going to start with our big one. Just going to nicely, slowly work that around. Try not to break it, damage it, scratch it. Just take your time and let it just kind of fold back into the slot. Okay. Okay, then you have your next O-ring, which is your medium-sized one, which will slide over this and work its way back into that slot. Okay, work that into that little, roll it in, I find to work best. Okay, that one's on. And then the last one, we're going to replace this last one here. And that one pops right on. And if you notice, I'm kind of taking my oily fingers and I'm just kind of going around the O-rings a little bit. That's actually a good thing to do so that they don't stick. You don't want to use a lot of oil, but just a little bit of oil around the O-rings just to kind of keep things moving so they don't lock up. You want to inspect the surface inside here. You want to wipe this out, make sure that there's no blemishes or dirt or anything that could keep the oil filter from sealing properly. Once you've done that, we will go ahead and install our new oil filter. It goes on the same way it came off, just kind of presses right on. It's just kind of a push fit, squeeze on. Okay, and we'll go ahead and reinstall that. Okay, go ahead and screw that down. I like to screw it down by hand as much as possible first. Okay, and then you want to put your wrench back on it, and you just want to go ahead and snug it up. Okay. Okay, not terribly tight. This is only plastic. You don't want to break it, but just nice and snug, and that's all it needs to be. Remove your tools, clean up the area, and that's it for the oil filter. Now we're going to go down and check the oil and take a look and see if we're done draining. We should be. Okay, so after I fished out the drain plug out of the pan, which is going to happen to you about 85% of the time, no matter how many times you've done it, you want to go ahead and you want to double check your washer. There should always be a washer on this. If it's not on the bolt, if it didn't come off, it's probably stuck on the pan. Make sure that you check the surface, make sure it's flat. It's a good idea to replace these washers just every time. They're cheap. Just put a new washer on there, put it back on there, and then you'll reinstall the plug and tighten it and start filling the oil. Okay, so now we're checking our oil drainage, and now we're down to just basically a slow drip. You could sit here and let it finish dripping if you really want to. It's minimal amount of oil. It's not worth worrying about too much. I'm going to go ahead and put my drain plug back in, making sure that I have my washer sealed properly. And I'm just going to snug that back down with my wrench. We'll wipe the area clean. A little hard to do one-handed, sorry folks. So reinstall our wrench, snug down our oil pan, okay? Just snug, you don't want to kill it, but snug, okay? And then I always recommend just wiping the area up. That way when you check things after you put oil back in it, you can make sure that there is no leaks. If there is, sometimes you have to go back in and change the seal again because sometimes they just don't seal. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and start refilling our engine oil. And as I told you before, Mobil 1 full synthetic for European cars, 040 is what's recommended for this vehicle. I'm going to put in 7 quarts of oil. I will be starting the car, checking for leaks, and then we'll top off as necessary. So we'll just go ahead and start adding oil now. Okay, this is our 7th quart. We're actually going to go 6.9, which is just a little less than a quart. So just leave a little bit at the very bottom of the bottle. Not much at all. But that's what they recommend to do because every vehicle will vary just slightly due to many different conditions. Okay, we'll reinstall our oil cap. We'll push our dipstick down. That lets me know that every time I see a car, I see the dipstick down, I know that I put oil in it. Okay, and we're going to go ahead. It's fine that we leave this filter off for right now. It's not necessary. It's just the breather port that goes into it. It actually doesn't really do anything except for suck the air from here rather than from directly there. So we're going to leave it off because I want to be able to inspect this oil filter area. So I'm going to go ahead and start the car. Okay, we're gonna let the car run for just a few minutes here. We wanna look, we wanna make very sure that there's no leaks around this. So you just wanna kind of keep checking it and make sure that there are no oil leaks coming out around this. Best to let it run for a few minutes, let it get warm. Keep an eye on this. Once you know this area is clean, also double check underneath, make sure that you're not leaking from the drain plug, and then you can go ahead and start to reinstall these things. Okay, so I'm just gonna let it warm up for a while. Be right back with you. Okay, so we've started up the car. We let it warm up. I let it warm up for about 2 or 3 minutes, just nice and warm. I double checked all the way around this filter, not only by sight, but it's a good idea to wipe your finger around it just in case you happen to miss something. This is very important because if this leaks, it'll be under high pressure and it'll literally be squirting out of this thing. And you could blow an engine up so quickly, it's not even funny. So you definitely want to make sure that this is completely sealed and no leaks. So now we're going to go back underneath. We're just going to double check our drain plug. Okay, it's not a bad idea to put your wrench back on it. Just make sure it's tight. But really what I'm looking for right now is to make sure that there's no leaks. I'm going to wipe the area clean. Okay, and then we're going to head back out. We'll be reinstalling the skid plate that goes all the way here, goes all the way underneath there. I've showed the bolts, the bolt holes on that. But first I want to double check. Put a wrench on the plug just to make sure. Okay, nice and snug. Make sure it's clean, and we'll leave it as that. Okay, so we've gone underneath the car. We've double checked the drain plug. We've made sure there's no leaks down there. We've double checked our oil filter. There's no leaks around there. We've double checked to make sure we put our oil cap back on. We double checked, make sure we put our oil stick back in. But before we start to put the rest of the car back together, I want to go over just one more thing you should check while you're here. It's always a good idea to double check your air filter. This is where the air filter is located on this vehicle. I'm going to slide in a little closer here. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and remove this bolt and this bolt. And this is what you will have to do in order to get the air filter out. So we're going to go ahead and loosen those bolts. Also, while you have this tube off, it's also a good idea. That way you can clean out the box. If there's any debris or anything inside the box, there's a good time to do it. Okay, so we remove those bolts. Simply lift it up, kind of pivots out, and then your air filter should just pull out. It can be a little tricky sometimes. There it comes. And that'll slide out. Okay. So, looking at our air filter, it's not too terribly dirty, but what I did notice right away is that it's brittle and it's actually started to break. I don't know if you can see that or not. So this probably got wet at some point in time, but this air filter, I would say 100% replace it because it's not doing its job anymore. These pieces will start to break up and they could actually work through the filter and get into your engine and cause damage. So we're gonna throw that away. And I already have a new one, so we'll be installing a new one. And here's our new one. Okay, so we're just gonna install the same way it came out. We're gonna go ahead and put the new one back in. Okay, you want to make sure the filter's seated all the way down first before you try to put the cover on. Okay, it can be a little tricky. Just work it around a little bit. You should feel when it goes back into its proper place. Then we'll go ahead and reinstall our screws. And these just are just snug. You don't want to tighten these very hard, just snug. Okay, double check both of those, make sure they're tight. Okay, that's good. And just make sure that the clips are in back here at the back. Make sure that the air filter is seated properly. And then we'll go reinstall this snorkel that we took out for the oil change. So that just plugs right into there. Okay. Okay, this one just kind of snaps right back over. It's just a snap fit. That snaps back in, and this is also just a snap fit. So those just snap back in. That's it. That's just loosely assembled. That's the way they do it. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. That's just what they do. So last but not least, we're going to reinstall our engine cover with our beautiful Mercedes emblem, of course. We're going to go ahead and put that right back on. And just like I said, they're just kind of press fit. So you just press right in there. And they'll snap back into place. You'll hear some cracking and snap crackling or whatever, but that's just them popping back into place. Okay, that's it. Now, what I do suggest is that once you take it off the jack stands, because right now I'm not actually level, that's why I'm not checking the oil level, but once I've taken it for a quick little drive, I'm gonna bring it back in here off the stands, and then I will be double checking the oil level and topping off as necessary. And just a reminder, before we go ahead and we take it off the jack stands, we take it out for a drive, I'm going to be reinstalling that wonderful skid plate we talked about. So I showed you where the bolts are for that. It's too hard to get the camera underneath there to show you as I'm actually doing it, but I showed you where the bolt locations are. You're going to be reinstalling that. Do that before you take it off the jack stands, unless you want to bring it back, put it back on the jack stands, etc., etc. Okay, so we've taken our Mercedes out for a drive. We let it get good and warmed up. We want to double check our oil level now. We will most likely have to top it off, but let's go ahead and do that. So simply on a flat surface. Just remove the dipstick, wipe it off. Okay, then dip it back in there, and then take a look at the dipstick. In case you do not know how to read a dipstick, this is what it looks like right now. Okay, see our oil level is here, and it should be here. So we already know we're a quart low. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a quart. Move the oil cap. Get our funnel. And we're going to add another quart. Okay, then we're going to check it again. We're going to give it just a second for the oil to go ahead and run down the engine. We're going to wipe off the dipstick again. We'll just do the same procedure. And dip it in, take a look. Okay, right now we're currently showing right about there. So remember that little bit of that extra oil that I left out earlier just as a precaution? Looks like we're probably going to need it. So we're going to add the rest of that. And again, we're just going to repeat. Wipe off the dipstick. Double check the oil level. Okay. I'm going to give it just a minute to run down because I still think that it is enough oil. It just hasn't gone all the way down. So we'll just keep double checking until we're within this range. Okay. This is the minimum range and this is the maximum range. So as long as we're in this area here, we're in good shape. Okay. So we're just going to keep doing this until we end up there. Okay, and there you go. And see, that was the full 8 quarts, and it's showing up full. So we'll reinstall our dipstick, take our funnel out, make sure that we reinstall our cap. Nice and tight, make sure that's good, wipe everything off. Okay, double check that we've reinstalled our snorkel, that's reinstalled. We've double checked our bolts on our air cleaner, make sure that's reinstalled. And we're done. That's it. Stay tuned for our next videos.